Shane Doan. For those that missed it, Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet reporting on Wednesday morning that according to several sources, the Canucks have asked the Toronto Maple Leafs for permission to speak to Shane Doan, who currently serves as a special advisor to the GM with the Leafs. Friedman did specify, however, that this isn't necessarily the Canucks looking to hire Doan as their next GM and that they might be looking to add him elsewhere in the front office. This is exactly what Friedman wrote. This is a snippet that I want to read. Doan, who played 1,540 NHL games from 95 to 2017, was hired by the Maple Leafs in June 2023. He received strong recent reviews from other members of the organization for how he's handled things as the season went sideways. One example, he wasn't afraid to admit his own mistakes and how he'd fix them. What potential role the Canucks see for Doan is unclear. He's never expressed a desire to be a full-time GM, but could definitely be part of a group. What do you make of that, Harm?
Yeah, two parts. One question is, what exactly does that role look like? How involved would Shane Doan want to be? And secondly, when I view Doan just as a potential part of a front office in some capacity, look, there are some unknowns where he hasn't been, let's say, an assistant general manager or had a really long track record of front office experience where you can look at, okay, he's been part of this department and these are the moves that they made under his watch. You can't really point to a lot of evidence, good or bad, when it comes to Shane Doan's ability to actually build a team. However, like a couple things. First of all, I haven't heard a single person ever in the hockey world have a bad thing to say about Doan. Like, by all accounts, just like a gem of a human being, super high character individual. And I actually have a Shane Doan story. I was traveling from Vancouver to Calgary to Nashville to go to the 2023 NHL draft. So you have the layover in Calgary, and it seemed like half the hockey world was on that flight. You're in that terminal area waiting to board. And like, I see AHL head coaches, I see scouts, I saw Willie Desjardins. I was wondering why he was going to the draft. But like, what struck me was every single hockey person going up and like saying hi to Shane Doan, and just the level of respect that they seem to have for Shane and appreciation, and how humble Doan himself was as well. Right. Like, over the years, I've gotten to kind of see from a distance a lot of different hockey execs, and like Doan, you can tell immediately like how down to earth he is, and again, just how much respect he has among his peers. You don't earn that just because you were a good player. So that's worth mentioning there. I also find it interesting that Trance had a story that he wrote around COVID in 2020. I think Trance's story was around just the process of what it's like for free agents being courted, like how you kind of get wined and dined and everything. And he spoke to Doan extensively about that experience, because there was obviously a time when Doan almost came to Vancouver, and seeing Doan's quotes there where he's raving about the way that Mike Gillis and Lawrence Gilman had essentially built a cutting edge organization, and the curiosity Doan seemed to have about all the sports science stuff and the analytics, like that's really encouraging to me, right? There are some people who've played the game and are traditional hockey guys. They're old school people, and they aren't willing to adapt. They're kind of dinosaurs, for lack of a better term. Doan, when you hear him talk about that Gillis and Gilman front office in that way, and just the curiosity he had about all those different elements, that makes me immediately go, okay, he's not going to be a dinosaur. He seems like he's innovative, would surround himself with the right people, different perspectives. I view that as a really strong green flag. But yeah, beyond that, it's tough to know, again, what capacity would he be joining this front office potentially in? And secondly, we don't actually have a track record of what his moves would potentially be. I would also point out, outside of being the special advisor for the Leafs, while Tree Living was there, he's been part of Team Canada's hockey management. So he has some experience there, which would be useful. But yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
So he's been assistant general manager. He's been the general manager for Hockey Canada at the World Championships. We've seen him at the Spengler Cup as well. And like you're saying, Harm, respect among his peers. And even what was noted in that Friedman article about how he's getting rave reviews internally because of how he's handled this season and, not being afraid to admit his own mistakes and how he'd fix them is the part that stands out from Friedman's article. So much so during this process, we're going to find ourselves saying, okay, well, this is a name, but we don't know too much because really, how are you supposed to know how much influence a guy has in the front office that they're currently a part of or the one that they were a part of? How do you know if they are owning up to their mistakes? How do you know if they've reflected on what went wrong? And how can you possibly be confident that the same mistakes that were made previously aren't going to be made? And again, we talked about Kevin Adams yesterday, and that was one of the questions we had was like, okay, what would he have done differently in Buffalo? Why does he think things didn't work out in Buffalo? One question I'd love to ask Kevin Adams is, why do you think that team rattled off so many wins starting the day you were fired? How did they win the Atlantic right after you were fired? Why do you think that is? And I would love to hear the answer. And I'm not saying that as a gotcha. I'm genuinely curious because if you're interviewing a guy, you want to know, okay, what have they learned? And pivoting off of what you were bringing up with the Drance article, which I read pretty thoroughly and went back and looked on, one thing that really stood out was how much Doan didn't think he knew everything as a current player. He was being courted as a big free agent. He didn't need to go in there asking about sleep doctors. He didn't need to go in there and have conversations about what they're doing at Manchester United, which is noted in this story as something that Doan says he remembers talking about with Mike Gillis, with Canucks ownership at Italian Kitchen, which, by the way, Doan says like 5 times he's been there and that's his favorite restaurant in the city. So he'd have access to that if he came to Vancouver. But my broader point being, Harm, so much so during this process, you're going to hear names and you're going to not really be able to have the inside knowledge of how does this person feel about their time. Sometimes they make it public. Again, Mike Gillis, when the Pittsburgh Penguins job was up for grabs, we saw that PDF document where Gillis talked about what he thinks went wrong during his time in Vancouver, pointing at amateur scouting. What does Shane Doan think went wrong for the Leafs this year? What is he going to lean on from the past? What does he think went wrong for the Canucks this year? How do you write those issues? And those are the questions that I think you have to ask during an interview, and the questions that we would obviously love to know the answers of so we can understand best who the best candidate for the Canucks is. But what's publicly out there, again, this Drance article, what Friedman had to say about Doan today as well. What's publicly out there about Doan, what you saw in that airport in Calgary. What we know about Doan is that he's well regarded in just about every hockey circle around. He has a desire to keep learning. He doesn't think he knows everything. And I think those really matter when you're looking at a guy to join your front office.
Yeah, and so much of being a successful, whether it's GM or president of hockey operations, is hiring the right people, empowering the right people, trusting them to do their job, giving them autonomy. And it's about like just putting people around you that are experts in their specific departments, right? When you're building out an analytics department, making sure that you have the right people there. Same thing on the pro scouting side, amateur side, player development, the coaches. And this is where the open-mindedness and curiosity of understanding that, hey, I don't have all the answers myself, like that is such a green flag. And then also the respect factor, that also means like you don't think a lot of people would love to work for Shane Doan. Like you don't think he'd be able to pitch people and get them excited about working in Vancouver, knowing the type of character he is, knowing how open-minded he is, knowing that he would likely genuinely empower the people around him, because that's not always a given, right? I hear stories from other front offices where there's a GM, let's say somebody's running the amateur scouting department, and the director of scouting gets overruled by the GM because the GM thinks he knows what's best for that first round pick, and it creates some friction. I mean, hell, we saw the example here with Judd Brackett and Jim Benning, but that happens around the league and other front offices too. That's the sort of thing where I think Shane Doan would be able to sell quality people on being able to come here. And I think that's really important because more than just the GM. It's who are the other high level execs that you bring to really round out this management group. I'll also say, generally speaking, I like the idea of whether it's a Shane Doan or a Chris Pronger, having somebody at like pairing somebody like that who has the playing background, who has the weight, the authority, the respect around the league, with somebody that's a little bit more data driven, like a Sam Ventura. We've rattled off a bunch of those names, but imagine pairing like a Doan or a Chris Pronger, one of those guys, with like a like an analytics driven guy. That to me would be a really well built foundation for an organization that would represent multiple different perspectives and be well rounded.
You got to hire good people. You got to hire good people for these jobs. And it seems like Shane Doan is absolutely one of those good people. So whether it's as a GM or in another role, whether it's an advisor, whether it's, hey, maybe he comes in under Rutherford. We don't know the exact role that the Canucks have envisioned for him, but we do know, courtesy of Elliot Friedman, that they've asked to speak with Shane Doan. And if they're granted that, it'll be really, really interesting to see if the Canucks are able to land him. We agree, though, right? That just like you should be trying to hire Shane Doan. Shane Doan would be a great get for this organization, whether it's at GM or in another role.
100% agree.